Hello.
Hey,
I think we're
Jonas.
live. Hey,
Is
hey.
this thing on?
Yes, yes. Well, I think clearly one of us does this for a living, and and the others don't. But this it's pretty nice, Greg. Nice setup there. Welcome everybody. This is a super exciting time to be in the developer tool space, of course, as always. And I think this is my third time moderating a panel at Postman's conference. So this is going to be another fun one. Greg, I think this is number two for us. But yeah, super excited to be here. And I think we can just start off with intros, and then we'll dive into the debate. Um, my name's Jonas Bashared, founder and CEO at StackShare. And for those that don't know, StackShare is a community of well over 500,000 developers. You can see what other developers are using in their tech stacks. You can see what the best companies in the world are also using in their tech stacks. So it's all one big tech stack party. You can also compare tools, including all the tools of the folks here on stage. As of late last year, we actually have a private version of StackShare that is available for free on the GitHub Marketplace that basically plugs into your private code base or code bases and shows you all the different tools you're using across your tech stacks, and then sends you alerts as they change. So you can think of it sort of as air traffic control for your tech stacks. You can check that out at stackshare.io/private. So yeah, that's a brief introduction, but I'm really excited to be here with all these smart folks that know way more about APIs and developer tools than I do. So thank you for being here. Ali, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So I'm Ali Nzana. I am the product leader for API testing tools at SmartBear, home of other testing tools that you also might know of, like Swagger Hub. My team runs Ready API, and I'm looking forward to talking tooling with some of these folks. I've talked tooling on panels with them before, and I think it should be a really fun conversation. So thanks for having me, Postman.
Awesome. Greg, do you want to go next?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Gregory Koberger. I'm the founder of README. We do developer hubs. So developer hubs in our minds include definitely documentation, but also a bunch of marketing stuff, community features. You can have your API logs and API keys like right in the docs so that everything knows who you are and things like that. And we sit at developer.tonsofcompanies.com.
Awesome. And Phil.
Hey, my name's Phil Sturgeon. I work for Stoplight, doing a little bit of DevRel and a little bit of product design or product management. We make a whole bunch of tools, helping make the API design first workflow fun and more accessible to a lot of people that don't like staring at YAML all day. Got a bunch of tools like Spectral you can use for API style guides and Prism for mocking, and a few different documentation things too.
All right. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Kevin from the home team.
Hi, so I'm Kevin Swiber. I'm a lead solutions engineer, which means at Postman, I speak to folks who are looking to use Postman and who are trying to adopt Postman internally and try to figure out how to best work it into their processes and their lifecycle. I'm not going to explain what Postman is. There are plenty of hours of that happening for the remainder of the day. Phil, I think Kinlane actually does like staring at YAML, so perhaps not a target customer for you. But I can definitely empathize with not being a big YAML fan. So
awesome. Well, so everyone here runs a dev tool or works at a dev tool company. So I think that we can just start off with what's new at your company, right? What new features or products are you excited about? And I'm sure you could go on for hours about that, but maybe just a few things that are exciting going on internally for you. Ali, I know Swagger Hub, as you mentioned, you've got so many products, Zephyr, the list goes on. So what's exciting to you?
Yeah, so we could talk a long time about all the SmartBear tools, but on our API side, I think for me right now, One of the most exciting things that the testing team is working on is support for asynchronous protocols. We'll be rolling out support for async API, for brokers like Kafka in the very immediate future in probably H1. And for me, it's really exciting because it speaks to the nature of folks' API stack, multi-protocol, a lot of specialization starting to happen. So selfishly on the testing side, I think that's a really exciting thing. More broadly, I'll sort of reach out to our test management team. I think some of the stuff that's happening now with Cucumber and Cucumber Studio with sort of adoption of BDD for devs. I'm a product manager. It is so important that before we start to build, we're all on the same page. And I love seeing some of the BDD adoption that's sort of beginning to spearhead that alignment being a lot more clear and a lot more sort of parity between the engineering teams, the UX teams, and the product folks and the business.
All right, awesome. I know, Greg, you all have a new free version, right?
Yeah.
How's that going?
Good. So we've kind of split things up a little bit where we have a free version of our reference guides, and then README does a bunch of other stuff. So our reference guides, my thoughts on reference guides are that it's kind of like handing someone a dictionary and saying like, go learn English or another language. It's really tough. Like it's great as a reference guide, but it's not where you want to be starting. And a lot of people put reference guides out there and think, this is my documentation, we're good to go. So yeah, you can definitely use our reference guides for free. And then on top of that, we have tons of features. Like we just launched a new feature called recipes, which are use case based. So instead of like, reference guides, which are like, here's how to post to this endpoint, it's more like, I want to charge a credit card, or I want to send a text message, things like that. And it walks you through how to get up and running with use case based stuff. We have a feature called API metrics, where you can like layer everyone's API logs right on top of the documentation. So they're not just looking at random static documentation, but they're seeing, oh, here's the calls I made, here's what went wrong. And you can even click like get support and message the, and send a link to the customer support for the API you're using and say like, hey, this isn't working. And instead of getting a response that says like, it's working for us, I don't know, like the support team can actually see what's going wrong. And you can talk on kind of, you're on the exact same page, metaphorically and actually physically on the same URL. So things like that are what gets me really excited about README is, not just listing out a bunch of endpoints and like rendering a Swagger file, which we do, but really layering a ton of stuff on top of it to make APIs easy to use.
Very cool, very cool. Phil, tell us what's going on at Stoplight.
Something that we're working on at the moment and about to roll out pretty soon is basically taking another swing at the already incredibly well-solved problem of reference documentation, right? I think we all here make reference docs, and just like Greg said, they're not the only piece of documentation you want to have. But there's a whole bunch of different documentation tools around, and some of them are really pretty, some of them have interactive API consoles, some of them are open source, some of them are highly customizable and embeddable into existing CMSs, and some of them require a lot of integration. We're having a go at doing all of that in one, basically. Something that you can run from the CLI, something that can be a web component, React component, runs anywhere JavaScript runs, and instead of kind of making a different integration for Jekyll and for every single CMS in the world, we're just kind of working on something you can embed into your own solution. So something that customers were asking for a while, because everyone has their own unique requirements. If we want SAML integration and we want these other VPNs and we want hide it behind a GitHub wall and all this different stuff. So we're coming up with a free open source tool that you can just slide into whatever you've got already. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Very cool. Free seems to be a new theme here.
Yeah.
Kevin, tell us a little bit about, or pick one of the many things that's new at Postman that maybe you're excited about.
Also free to a certain extent.
There we go.
So yeah, again, there's a lot of new stuff that's out there, a lot of folks talking about things. I think where, my role comes in the organization and just the fact that I get to speak to a lot of customers, what's really exciting to me is seeing some development around the API entity inside of Postman, where you can go and sort your assets and say like, oh, these are the environments that go with this version of the API. These are the test collections that go along with this version of the API. and then not just from a feature perspective of being able to manage those assets, but it's really opening up the conversation in the organization of who manages these assets. What does our API lifecycle look like inside the organization? And so more than just, oh, I have a place to go and click on things in the UI, what I'm really excited about is helping to facilitate that conversation internally so people can start improving on their own API lifecycle internally.
Gotcha. Very cool. And it sounds like SmartBear, you do a little bit of that as well, where you're thinking about not just, building the API, but testing. So that's awesome. Maybe we can dive into some slightly more interesting topics. What developer tool that's new, that is not your own developer tool, are you most excited about, and why? Anyone can start.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily, it's probably a developer tool. It's a tool for developers. Pipedream is my favorite new thing. As a PHP developer in my past, we always joke that PHP is the glue of the internet. And all you're doing really is just gluing different things together. But this is exactly what Pipedream is. It's a no-code solution, kind of like Zapier, but you can do anything with it. And I've got my whole life wired up. Like when I finish a bike ride on Strava, it converts it into a few different formats and shoves it up to Dropbox, so I can put it on like a heat map of everywhere I've ever cycled. And I've just got everything integrated with everything through Pipedream, and you just kind of like drag a few blocks together and change a bit of node, and then everything works. It's magic. And APIs make that possible. You just take something out of one and put it in somewhere else, and yeah, really cool.
Wow. So you've basically automated your life with Pipedream?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, so it's not open source though.
No, but they have a really forgiving free tier. So yeah.
Okay, like all great developer tools. That's awesome. Pipedream. All right. Anyone else started to automate their lives with something? No. All right.
No, not really automating my life. For the most part, I use kind of simple things, right? Like I still use Vim from time to time.
Classic.
Yeah. And I really like, it's because it can't exit. I've been using Vim for 15 years, same window. I haven't restarted my computer yet. I can't. Something that I've been using for a little while now, though, that I really enjoy is a tool called ngrok that forms an SSH tunnel between some public endpoint and something running locally on your computer. So really super helpful for things like testing out webhooks, right? So you've got some kind of webhook hub that needs to speak back to your endpoint. If you're in development, there are some obstacles to getting that stood up, right? But with something like ngrok, you can have that public endpoint or publicly exposed endpoint that's actually hitting something that's running on your own system. So yeah, just a shout out to you folks.
Yeah, ngrok has been around for a while. It's extremely popular. So very cool stuff. Greg, Ali, what are you using these days or excited about?
Well, I can tell you something. It's not necessarily new, but I think it is kind of exciting in the API space. When we talk to our customers, the biggest things that they're trying to manage that are making them pull their hair out, it will not come as a surprise to anybody here. It's versioning, it's change management on sort of large scale, and really trying to understand, from a practical standpoint, like, I made a change. What behavior did I change in the API? And so, the thing that I'll bring up, which again, I'm sure is well known to all the folks here, is Optic. It's just diffing your API, but actually on the behavior. And for me, especially sort of thinking at a tester lens, it's just one of those things where we are at, I feel like, this very amazing inflection point in the API market space. We're seeing a lot of things begin to differentiate and really come up with manifesting very specific purpose in the API space. And so it becomes a lot easier to start thinking about, well, how am I going to use those tools? But no matter what protocols you're using or specifications or anything else, understanding behavior and understanding how your changes affect behavior, that's at the core of every dev's workflow. So for me, that's one of the things out there that I feel like it's one of those little things that you get evangelical about. Like you just want people to know about it so that they don't have to suffer through that pain.
Very cool. Anyone else using it? No. Okay.
Just played around with Optic a little bit. Super cool project, super cool product, great people running it. Also keeping an eye on Akita Software, which has a similar product out there. So really excited about folks and the new stuff they're building in this space. Really cool stuff.
Greg.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a slightly different way. I used Airtable over the past few months and started using it not just as a database, or not just as like a Excel copycat, but as like an actual database for a personal project. So not for like actual like production stuff yet, but and I don't think it's ever something you could really use for like a database for like a real company right now. But I'd be really shocked if the next after like the next like database that we all get excited about doesn't feel a lot more like Airtable than does Mongo or SQL. And like we spend so much time arguing over like Mongo and SQL and bigger databases and all that. It's like I just feel like it's Airtable, the UI, like how you interact with it. It just feels like it blows all of them out of the water from a UI perspective. And of course, it's not fast, for what you need it for. But I don't know. I get really excited about this concept that developer tools and just regular tools are going to blur, and we're not going to be talking about developer tools per se. Any differently than we talk about just tools in general. And some are going to have, I just like how when different apps have different ways to interact with it. So you can use Airtable without ever touching the UI, or you can do it without ever touching a line of code, or you can do a mix of both, and it genuinely doesn't matter. Phil mentioned something before about kind of having a component that you can just drop in. I think a lot of companies have API access, which is really great. And it's like, this raw touch everything. And that's cool, but I don't think developer tools have to mean the rawest version possible. I think they can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes that means the rawest version. Sometimes that means a web component you drop in. Sometimes it means a lot of different things. I think what I'm really most excited about is this concept that developers really hate most developer tools. They're just painful and miserable and all that. And I think some of the best tools are starting to realize that and are starting to add this, just be really just great, fun tools to use. And don't think of it as like, it has to be painful to use a developer tool. Like it can be really nice and fun and simple and easy to use. So I don't know if I really give an answer, but I'm really excited over the next 5 to 10 years to see how people start to rethink developer tools.
But I love what you just said. I mean, for the folks who saw Woz's keynote yesterday, like it's the human factor. And I am a very strong challenger of the idea that developers don't deserve nice things. Like don't worry, they can write code to do that. Like, okay, but sometimes there's an element that makes it easier for you to make a quick decision that can be supplied by a UI or something like that. And those are the things that when you kind of look longer term, it's how well does it integrate, and then into my workflows, into my day, also into the rest of the stuff that I want to wire up. But then also just like, how does it enable and make that decision point or something like that faster? So I love that idea. And I think, we've seen really successful companies and tooling embrace it because it's harder to do, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I've been using Airtable a whole bunch recently, actually. So in my spare time, I run a reforestation charity, and I could have spent a whole bunch of time creating a backend and a database and an API to like track all of these trees and all the photographs and all the coordinates, but I just didn't want to mess around with that. I'm busy planting trees instead of writing code about planting trees. So yeah, we use Airtable, we upload the image, and then the requirement came through that we need 3 words in there as well as coordinates. So I was like, fine, pipe dream, when a new Airtable record comes through, ping the 3 words API and shove that back in Airtable. So the whole thing is pretty much no code apart from this one little function that I just copied and pasted off their tutorial site and plugged in a few variables, and it just works with no effort. And I think they're both still on the free tier. So yeah, no code and it's free.
Right. So the future of developer tools is no code free. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really funny that that's where things are moving back towards, right? That we're writing less code and we're doing less of the things that we thought we would do more of. So I think that's a good segue into, what do you all see as some of the trends that are emerging within the API tool space, right? But specifically, maybe let's start off with API specifications, right? I know that a number of folks here have Open API, have done something related to Open API recently. So what are you all seeing in terms of API specs and some of the trends there?
Governance. Lots of people are like, okay, cool. We have this definition that can describe our APIs. How do we start managing these at scale? And for a lot of folks at this point, it's an aspiration, right? Like, okay, we have a program that we're starting now where we're going to have these mandates around how our APIs look. So I think just having something like Open API out there has sparked this whole movement from the enterprise architecture groups, which I'm not speaking bad about. I'm a previous enterprise architect, so I understand answering it depends for everything. And it's Open API, it seems, is really kind of taking over in this space. There have been several specifications out there over the years. I don't think anyone who's come up with one of these at some big company isn't part of the Open API initiative now. Like everyone cares about Open API to a certain extent. So I think largely, for now, it's flying the mission accomplished banner behind it. We'll see as these architecture initiatives start getting implemented, we'll see if that sticks around going forward. And I think it probably will, at least with the backing that Open API has right now.
Yeah, governance was going to be my answer too. I mean, I first heard that term like 3 years ago at API Days conference, and someone was giving a talk about how awesome API governance is. I asked, like, after the talk, I was like, what tools do you use for governance? Oh, I don't think there are any. So we've all been talking about it for 3 years, and I think it means something different to everybody, right? Some people think governance means design reviews, which could be just looking at Open API changes in a pull request. Some people think governance means contract testing, which it kind of is. And other people think it means like style guides. And it's kind of all of those things and more. And so I think over the next year, we're going to start to see it move from being a bit of an ethereal concept in conference talks to like productized stuff you can use. I know we're working on some stuff at Stoplight. Like we have Spectral, which can implement style guides, and it's all a little bit like you've got to run this CLI script over there and maybe put it in your CI, and it will complain that you've used the wrong you've put camel case where it should have been whatever hyphen. All these different rules that you might want to make for it just kind of get shoved out into a CI/CD pipe somewhere, and it's quite hard to then bring that stuff back. So we're working on making a kind of a dashboard for all of that, so you can start to see which APIs are following the rules you defined and which aren't, and who might need a bit more help and things like that. So I expect to see a lot more people productizing the governance space soon.
I think governance is a huge thing, and I speak from the vantage point of having run some data governance efforts, which I see sort of at the very core of it. In the API space, I think, obviously our Swagger tooling has the ability to apply, governance to specifications as well. But I also see it as sort of a slightly different thing as people start to think about APIs as they relate to their companies. So, SmartBear for a number of years has done a state of API survey. And one thing that I thought was absolutely fascinating in our last one, which we did in 2020, was the very sort of small, like 1 to 20, I think, developer organizations. They were not really doing design first, but they were pretty interested in it. The group that was the most interested in applying design first, or like figuring out governance, design first, all of that stuff for their API program, was actually the 20, like maybe it was 25 to 100, because they're the first group that ever had to deal with the pain of scaling. And once you've dealt with that, you want somebody to set up rules and help. And I think governance is really about that. And it can't just be a tool. It has to be people and process and tooling together. And I think the best tools in that space will understand and give affordance for exactly that. Yeah.
Greg.
And so I have a bit of a controversial opinion about OAS and Swagger, and I absolutely abhor the whole concept a little bit. So I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but so my problem with it. So my thoughts on this is, I think that Swagger and OAS is really great if the question is, how do I document my API and how do I make sure that every single part of my API can be documented? Where I think it falls really short, though, is that how you should be writing APIs? I think like a lot of times OAS kind of relishes in this insane amount of complexity. So if you think about an API, you send data in, something happens, you get data back. That's pretty much what an API is. But OAS makes it, I mean, APIs in general, OAS is not at fault. They're just kind of, catalyzing or you kind of writing down what already exists. But like, think about sending data. There's 6 different formats to send data in any API request. Headers is a different format from query params, from path params, from body params, form data, cookies, and they're all in different formats or serialized differently. Like, it's insane to me that we've decided the way to solve this is to explain all these complexities as opposed to saying, that's insane, we shouldn't be doing this. And I don't hate REST or I don't hate OAS or anything like that any more than I hate TCP/IP or anything like that. I just feel like we should be hiding that stuff away from the end user, not kind of exposing and being like, here's our 50 ways to send data. I don't know. I think most of us here create APIs and we all use APIs as well. And I think if we really were to examine our opinions, we'd have very different opinions on how we create APIs versus the APIs we like to use. And I think, I really wish OAS did a better job of reeling in people. Is it, Phil, am I right about this, that you used to have a WeWork, a subset of OAS that you would kind of have and like with a linter and stuff? Is that true?
We were using basically proper JSON schema and OpenAPI, and then converting proper JSON schema to like OAS flavored OpenAPI, because the discrepancy there was a nightmare. Thankfully, in OpenAPI 3.1, that discrepancy is gone. Me and lots of other people spent lots of time making that happen. So OpenAPI 3.1 and JSON schema are just the same thing. But yeah, we had to convert stuff for a while.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not against OpenAPI at all. Like, I think it solves a problem. I just don't think it solves all the problems. I think it makes it so dead simple for you to have a really complex API that you're like, everything's documented, everything's written there. Like, it's all there. It's all kind of one-to-one-ish with the API itself. And that just feels kind of crazy to me. Like, when the APIs I love Stripe's API, and they have one of the best things I've ever seen in documentation, which is like, this is not a RESTful API, but if you're familiar with REST, you'll understand this API. And everything's a post. You can argue whether that's good or bad, but like, they don't care. Everything's a post. You just send JSON and that's it. All the data is in JSON with a few exceptions. Everything's SDK for the most part. They switch between real-time stuff and not without even telling you. You don't have to know. You don't have to think about it. And that gets me way more excited. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have an OAS file. You definitely should. But I do think that a lot of times APIs are just so stupidly complex. And the more I see coming from OAS, where it's just more and more complex, I'm like, how is anyone supposed to understand how to use this? Like, it's really great for the person building the API to be like, I want to be able to do these insane things. But like, no one wants to use an API that has like 6 levels of nesting, or that, just does the insane stuff that OAS lets you do.
And that's exactly what governance and design reviews are all about, right? Especially if you're going with the design first approach. OpenAPI is just a description of, it can be a description of what's already been done, but by that point, you've already made a terrible API and released it on the world and released the Kraken, and now everyone's sad about it. But if you're using the API design first approach, people can look at it and go, oh, I don't know about that. And then you can have a conversation about it when all you've done is design it and you haven't spent all that time writing the code. So that's why I've been pushing so hard in various different ways to try and get people on the design first workflow, because it means you can have a real conversation about what that API is going to be before you waste a bunch of time and money building it. Like, but writing you create a blueprint for a house before you build it, not afterwards. And you can still create a blueprint for a terrible house that isn't physically going to work, but then someone will go, that's not going to work, and you've solved the problem before you made it.
I think the other piece of that, though, too, is in a lot of conversations I've heard about OAI and other specification formats, they're emphasizing the human readable aspect, which is, it is sometimes for a certain value of human, but it is. But the thing that I think is cool, and I'm a tooling vendor, so I'm hopelessly biased, is the machine readable part. Like, because the machine readable part makes governance like slap you on the wrist before you go to design review governance possible. It makes understanding intent, virtualization, something that obviously the SmartBear tooling is sort of very heavily uses, but try it out before you actually build it. And for us, that is an element of design first. You might not have actually written a full specification, but just sort of sketched out a few endpoints in our tool, and Ready API will let your partners interact with it. That's a very powerful thing to say, because I'm a product manager, so I write user stories. Bunch of times that I write user stories, and then as I start writing like the acceptance criteria, I start getting into the weeds. I'm like, so what happens when we do this? What happens when we do that? And I quickly realized that I have written a crap user story and I need to fix it. And it's the same thing. You make a prototype of something, you're able to see the limitations of the things that you've chosen and the things that you need to also create additional affordance for. So I think I always look at it with that tooling piece.
Yeah, Ali, I think it gets back to the point that you made that developers deserve nice things. I think YAML is like the epitome of, at least we're all equally unhappy. So, it's the compromise here. It's I have problems editing it, you have problems reading it, but, we're all equally unhappy. And right, like humans could read binary if they so chose. It's just really difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So I think absolutely, tooling is what has to be to the rescue here. I mean, we have the same issues with XML, right? I mean, the early XML viewers, and of course, it was much more complex in certain ways, and you can bring in different schemas and everything. But it's any kind of config type format that we promise and try really, really hard with all sincere effort to make both machine readable and human readable is going to come down to some kind of compromise that makes people unhappy. So I think to give developers that good experience, then we do need tooling to help.
Yeah, the Postman collection is JSON, right? How many people look at that directly? I do know people that do that. They would edit their Postman collection and then commit that, and it would get synced off somewhere else. But most people are using Postman when they're doing that. Exactly the same with OpenAPI or any other format you want to think of. Like how many people are, when they send HTTP requests, how many people are writing Telnet? They're using some sort of interface. Like you can't get too upset about the underlying machine format. And just because it happens to look a bit human readable doesn't mean that everyone should all the time.
But you know what? I think the other thing that you brought up, Phil, is a really great thing, like with JSON schema, because it speaks to another trend that we're seeing, which is specialization. Like, OAI, OAS, obviously we all use it, we all love it. More than 80% of APIs out there are probably using it in some format. At the same time, we've supported GraphQL for more than a year, and we've seen a lot of uptake of it. We've already supported like event-driven protocols for a while, but we're seeing a huge uptick in interest in it. And Async API, as a tester, it becomes a way of describing the things that I need to bang on and figure out. As a user of the API, it sort of describes what I can do and what I can expect. So I think that when we start to see the specialization happen, it's a really grand thing, because it means that the specification can be leaner, less bulky, which makes it more adoptable, more adaptable, and better able to represent what the future of that kind of a practice will be. So for me, I think that that's a great trend, and one that I think we should continue to see.
Yeah.
GraphQL is the future of APIs. Agree or disagree?
Lol. Just laugh at the question. It is in the future, like it will be there, but I don't think we're going to see everyone use it for everything all the time. Or I hope not, at least.
Yeah, it's the past and present of database interaction, right? It's generating my queries, it's specifying what my fields are, it's having all of that flexibility, and then all of the problems on the back end too that folks have with queryable databases. So. Am I going to hit the N+1 problem? How do I optimize this query on the back end, right? Like you can very easily shoot yourself in the foot with SQL, right? You can have a query that never returns for 14 days, right? And the same kind of issue can happen on the GraphQL side as well. So, but I'm also one of these people who say, every technology has its place, and there's benefit all, for folks who need it, right? Going back to the enterprise architecture, typical response of it depends. It always depends. So, is it the future? I don't know. I think it's going to be hard to kind of, dethrone typical REST APIs today. Even as technology moves forward, we're still seeing like huge amounts of folks with APIs on HTTP 1.1. And Greg, I was going to say, if you do happen to hate TCP, HTTP 3 is going to be UDP. So hooray.
Yeah.
It's going to be a while before folks find something else that makes them say, what I'm doing with REST APIs isn't really great.
So I feel like, we were conflating APIs a little bit. Like internal APIs, I think GraphQL is phenomenal for it. If you're building an internal project, especially with React, like go for it. I think externally, there's issues. My issue with it is discoverability. You get so much power. It goes back to what I said before about like you have all the raw everything, but you don't have to do with it because it's too raw. But what I will say in defense of GraphQL is I really like that people are bucking this trend that the only way to build an API is REST. I don't think that GraphQL is the future, but I also don't think REST is the future. I don't think we're going to have one technology that's the future. I'm a big advocate of people solving problems the best way possible. I don't think, I think REST hasn't really changed in 20 years. It's been, we've thought about it differently and all that, but we're still very constricted back to what Ali said about machine readable. Like we're thinking like machines, we're posting to a resource. And that's very constricting as well. And GraphQL is very unrestricting to a weird degree, but I'm really excited to see what happens over the next few years. And the thing that keeps me up at night is we document RESTful APIs at my company, and everyone here basically does the same. And the thing that keeps me up at night is what's going to come out of nowhere and just be phenomenal and amazing and simple. And at what point are people going to decide that RESTful APIs are just way too complicated? And there's better ways out there. There's ways that think like we do as humans. I don't know. I don't think GraphQL is the future, but I do like that people have kind of decided or have started to think like, what can we do differently? And I'll be really excited to see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years.
Distinction that you made between internal and external, because I think that we tend to just talk about APIs in general, but there's a huge difference between how you're using stuff internally versus how you're exposing it to customers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think.
Jonas, I think we're losing you.
Yeah, we
Lost
cut
your
out
eye.
there.
But Phil, go for it.
Yeah, it's something I've been trying to get folks used to the idea of for a while. Like I've written a few blog posts about like when to use which of these different things, like gRPC, GraphQL, REST, or maybe not even a read-write API at all, right? I think what a lot of people may not notice is that REST is meant to be a lot of extra context is added into the message so that you don't have to try and guess conventions, right? Like, should you retry this request or not? It's right there with the retry after. Is this mutable or not? It's right there. And all of this kind of extra stuff, all of the controls and next actions, all of this stuff is baked into the message so that every single message can be read in a like standard way by loads of different components and different bits of the network and teams on the other side of the world that speak a different language. And that's what REST is all about. And that's way too much stuff for like an internal microservice that just does a few little bits. So with GraphQL and gRPC, you end up creating all of your own conventions. GraphQL intentionally ignores HTTP, so it can run over AMQP or whatever other stuff. And so by intentionally ignoring that layer, it's not very good in that layer. You know what I mean? Like it fails to leverage a lot of the stuff that HTTP is really good at. And you then start creating all of your own conventions that you have to teach people about. Is an update partial, or does it do a full replace? Well, if you're using put and patch, then you know for a fact which one's which, unless they implemented it wrong. People always do that. And so I think, which one do you need? What internal versus external is a really good comparison, because quite often I recommend people use like a bunch of gRPC internally in maybe their department or their team or their domain kind of surfaced off, and then expose all of that as a REST API that people can just kind of get information from when they need it. Best of both.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's sort of interesting in that whole sort of space is looking internal versus external when people come, when customers are asking us about performance testing, because, if you look at some of the things like Apollo, with GraphQL, you can be like, all right, so change the call, but just a little bit, and it'll be like, so when you do that, it's going to be 3 times as big, and then you'll have all of these other issues. And so performance and the optimization there, I think, becomes really important when you're trying to communicate with the world, and we're expecting everything to be so real time and everything else. So you need to really understand what your requirements are. I think we're seeing a big upsurge in interest in gRPC because of that as well, on the internal side too.
Awesome. I think I'm back.
Yes, you are.
Hello.
Awesome. So we've got a few minutes left here. Any parting words that you want to leave the Postman folks here with? And we can just go around. Ali, any parting words?
I think when it comes to dev tooling, my word is insist on having nice things. Insist on stuff that helps you get the job done and helps you have better insight into your processes and what's going on. And I think there's so many things out there in the space right now that are really exciting and give you an opportunity to have exactly that.
We can have nice things. Phil?
Really give API design first a try, even if it's just for one API. It's really hard because it's the opposite of everything we've always done as API developers for our whole career, for however long we've been doing it. And it's just literally asking you to change how you do things, and maybe that suggests you were doing it wrong, and that's hard to, it's very, very easy to just say, I'm not doing that. But yeah, really give API design first a try. Google it, whichever tool you end up using. Sure, it's great. Try a few out, but give it a go.
And try Stoplight. Awesome.
Sure.
Greg, any parting words?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Ali said, maybe in a more slightly differently. My belief is that no one cares about your API. And I mean that in a great way. They're trying to do something really great with it. Most people who use APIs are not at this conference. They don't come to API conferences. They don't know 99% of the stuff we're talking about, the words and RPC and GraphQL or whatever. They're just trying to get something done. And I think the future isn't the people who are here who care about APIs. The future is people who don't care about APIs, but just want to do something really, really cool.
There we go. Kevin.
Yeah, I'll just say keep challenging tool vendors in this space, right? We all, especially I know on this panel, deeply care about that experience for developers and helping to engage and enable what it is that you all want to do. So the more feedback that we get as folks who are building these tools, the better the experience can be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone. GraphQL is the future.
Thank you, guys.
JD, thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.